Hello, I'm Kevin with Profound Technologies. We're an audiovisual systems integration company that provides solutions for collaboration meeting rooms, such as Microsoft Teams rooms and Zoom. And we do specialty spaces such as training rooms, auditoriums, and command centers. Today, we're sitting down with Rob Chynowski of Seaglass Technology for another installment of Profound Sit Down. Rob, great to have you here today.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Now, we've worked together with a number of customers, but let's talk about you and Seaglass Technology, Rob. So business has been around for 7 years, started in 2017.
Right.
Focused on IT security, IT support, managed IT, and a special focus on hedge funds and alternative investment companies.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about Seaglass Technology and what is your specialty?
So that is it. So Seaglass Technology, managed IT security service provider based in New York City, and our real niche is working in the alternative investment space. It's a vertical that we know well, that we've been working in for well over 20 years prior to Seaglass Technology. Most of our senior technical team came from within the alternative investment space, and we just know what their tale of woe is, right? We know what their issues are and how to fix them.
Sure, yeah, and there's a variety of customers we know from working together with those, which will remain nameless, but quite an extensive experience. What are some of the particular challenges that are germane to hedge funds and alternative investment companies that you help solve those problems?
So it is, it's always IT security is always top of mind, right? So they are genuinely high on the target list for the bad actors. And so it is really, not only making sure that they have the best security hygiene or framework built in place, but it is also making sure that we have a good plan to detect and then to respond or mitigate issues, if and when they come up.
Okay.
So that's for starters. But then there's the whole, talking about what areas of technology as it relates to their compliance and regulations, depending on who they're beholden to.
Yeah. So we've identified the compliance is a big thing, particularly for the financial services. And then there's this concept of, set it and forget it versus that kind of ongoing kind of curation of their technologies. Tell us a little bit about how Seaglass Technology differs from other IT companies that might just put something in place, and really how your approach, your road mapping, your ongoing customer meetings is different.
Yeah, so we generally have business conversations with our clients. We don't have a good, better, best stack, right? So we do more of an a la carte consulting to determine through a series of assessments sometimes the things they're doing well, the areas they need improvement, and maybe the areas that they have some risk, right? So, and then we can prioritize those areas that they need to be addressed and create a roadmap, right? If there's something that needs to be addressed today, we make sure that they're aware of it, and we make sure that it gets addressed. And then the rest of the stuff we can schedule quarterly or annually, whatever fits for their technology. Could be budget, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity, and later we'll talk about a company called KnowBe4 that we've learned a little bit about a recent cybersecurity concern that happened there. But what are some of the proactive ways that you're helping your clients to stay ahead of the bad actors?
So it really is about just through a series of assessments, understanding where they may have some vulnerability. It is employee training, making sure that the employees understand what the risk is, not only what to do and what not to do, but understanding what the risk is to the organization. So employee training is a big part of it for sure.
Okay. So the website, the Seaglass website, is a good place for people to start. There's some case studies on there, of course, and then there's this idea of a assessment that can be done. Mm-hmm. Can you maybe tell us a success story from one of those interactions where you did an assessment and maybe what came of that was able to help the customer better secure their IT or develop in some way?
Sure. So the assessment gives us a lot of good information. and some of the areas for improvement, right? So, and it could be simple stuff like, hardware that is just not supported any longer by the manufacturer, or hard drives that are ready to, fill up and crash, or, there could be an IT security vulnerability that we would need to address for our clients. But, I would say one of the recent studies, what it showed us and showed the client, and it's really IT 101, is that they had more of their user devices were just dated, 4 or 5 years. To them, it was in the middle of its life cycle, but to us it was at the end, and we were able to show them how making an investment in those devices would help just increase employee productivity, right? So, we had some folks in the office complaining that when they sat down to type an email, they would hit the keyboard and then they would wait for the letters to
Oh my
right?
goodness.
So, and we're not talking about devices that were terribly old, but they weren't sourced right to begin with, right? And they just bought some, they made sure they got, well, these are good enough, it was a price point purchase. So, so we made the right recommendations, and one of the things they realized that, the ROI was coming pretty quickly because their employees, their morale was up, right?
Absolutely.
So now they actually have,
Now my keyboard works.
now they can do their work, right? They
Yeah.
can do their job. So, employee morale was up, and they were being, much more efficient. And that was something that we were able to determine pretty quickly from doing a simple assessment, right? So it doesn't always have to be a catastrophic event.
Right.
It could be something small like that.
Is there any type of, let's just say, low-hanging fruit where you come in and you do an assessment, and it could be from the customer's perspective, they might think it's daunting to do thus and so, but you can say, oh, no, this is something we at Seaglass are able to do, fairly well with you, whether it's expeditiously or in some way where the customer just feels like, I don't know, and then you deliver that solution.
So, so there's always low-hanging fruit. In some cases, like the example I just gave you, the low-hanging fruit was to upgrade the devices. Other cases might be to install an EDR or an endpoint detect and respond solution, so that in the event that there is some event or somebody clicks on something they're not supposed to, that we would catch it sooner than later. So, and a lot of times they'll say, but we have antivirus. We've always had antivirus. So it's the next level, right? So it is when we talked, I'm going to take a step back because I just had a thought. Well, so back in the early 2000s, when you talked to somebody about IT security, it was always kind of firewall do you
Yeah,
have,
exactly.
right?
It was
So,
like a
right. So, I have the best, and so
sidewinder.
yeah. So IT security has evolved, to all of these other software components. And I'm not suggesting by any means that the firewall isn't necessary, because it definitely is. But things like the endpoint detect and respond are as important as a firewall was back in 2001, 2002, along with being able to manage and monitor their SaaS applications to determine where they're being logged into from, having logging and monitoring or gathering that information through a SIEM. Those are the kind of things that would be low-hanging fruit, not incredibly expensive, but might be a little bit daunting for an end user or the business owner to think that they're just going to implement on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the trends you're seeing here lately?
IT security is top of mind, right? So we did a survey with our clients, or not only our clients, but just alternative investment firms to begin with, and asked them the things that are keeping them up at night, right? Not necessarily in technology, just in business, right? So, and technology was top of mind, right? So making sure that they didn't have an issue with somebody clicking something that they're not supposed to, or making sure that they provide positive returns for their clients was another thing that came up over and over. not experiencing any service interruption when they're doing upgrades or migrations, cloud migrations, digital transformation, just making sure that the employee morale is intact when it comes to technology, that they're not just, there's got to be a better way to do this kind of scenario. I call that suffering in silence, right? So, the folks that are using the technology just get so frustrated with it that they deal with it, right? So now they're not being productive, and every day's a bad day.
Yeah.
So they're getting their job done, but it's a struggle.
Yeah. So is there some level of ongoing training or support you do for the user base so that they understand some of the things, the pitfalls to avoid with cybersecurity? Because so many of the things are breaches that might not necessarily be through their main systems. They might be identity related type instances. What are you doing to help with that?
So we provide employee training. So we do phishing campaigns, and if they click on something that they're not supposed to, we can provide them with a tutorial. We try not to get them to the point where it's training fatigue, right? Where they're constantly being phished by us, but we want to make sure that we do it regularly enough that they're conscious of it. But it's not something we want them to think about all day. Like, is this one of those training, emails? So,
oh yeah, the game of cat and mouse has like raised itself to an art form. I mean, I think that doing it all the time might not be a bad idea. For example, we recently had this happen at Profound, where we had a web lead come in, and it was seemingly through Nucor, which is, I guess, the domestic-based steel company, and the domain was thenucor.com, and it had a instant forward to the main company's domain. Okay. But when we did a whois lookup on it, online, it was registered in Africa.
All right.
And so you get this lead form, it looks legitimate. You click on the link to the domain name, and because they're forwarding it, it refreshed and looked, adequate. Had we not gone through some of our other paces, we could have been in a situation where we, sold them something, and they used a fake credit card and then had to ship it somewhere else. So these things seem to be happening all the time.
So we see very similar. I've had our most recent was Heinz US, right? So they wanted to buy 100 laptops, and that's not the first time we've seen that. We've seen it over and over. And there is a phone number, and if you call, you can talk, real live to the person. When you look them up on LinkedIn, you see that his account was just created, and so a little bit of due diligence goes a long way, right? When you see those kind of things.
Yeah.
Man, we get them twice a year. It's very similar.
There's a recent kind of article that's circulating the interwebs about a company called KnowBe4, which is in the security business, and it had gone through all of the process of hiring and decided to hire this person, sent them their Mac, and then instantly found out that it was trying to unleash a bunch of malware on their systems. Come to find out, it was a AI generated image that was part of their employee file, and then also spoofed in their Zoom interviews. So totally got past their HR systems and eventually was hired. There was no data that was compromised with KnowBe4. However, what a crazy story that's happening to a company in the security space.
For sure. And, one of the things to really understand, and I think I said it earlier, is that the bad guys are definitely adopting the new technology quicker than the good guys are. So they're figuring out ways to use it, and to those levels where they're, you're doing a Zoom meeting with something that's being spoofed, right? So to the point where I had with Heinz, when I called up and I talked to a guy, I mean, that's just taking it to the next level.
Yeah, that's wild. So what are some success stories? I mean, on Seaglass's website, there's a number of case studies, which are great if you get a chance to look at them. But from your perspective, what are some success stories with customers that you've come to Seaglass and you've been able to help them?
So, listen, largely our new clients come to us because they're just not happy with the services that they're being provided, right? So there's a lot of companies, managed service providers out there that have like a set it and forget it kind of business model, and they have a good, better, best package, right? So it's pick one of these and that's what you get, and then we set it and forget it. We're a little bit different in terms of the way we work with our clients. We want to get to know the business, right? So I don't necessarily have technical conversations all the time. I want to talk about the business, right? What's working for them, what's not working for them. What are their goals? 3 months, 12 months, 5 years? Is it growth? Is it to add employees? What are the goals of the organization? And we want to try to align the technology with the business. So we become a trusted advisor, and we want to be a partner. I don't ever want to be a technology vendor, right? So we're pigeonholed into just providing services. So we generally are trusted advisors and a good business partner. So some of the success stories are that when we go into a client, they're not happy with the services they're being provided. They may have an internal IT staff that spends a tremendous amount of time being very, very reactive to the business, end user support. They can't innovate. They can't keep technology updated. They can't keep themselves current with the changes in technology because there's always something blowing up. So generally what we would do is go in and do it through a series of assessments, determine 3 things, right? The things they're doing well, the areas they need improvement, and then the areas where there may be some risk or vulnerability. And that doesn't have to be from a cyber breach, although it could be, but it could be something like hardware that's just had warranties expire, or hard drives that are filling up and getting ready to crash, or it could be anything, the vulnerabilities or the issues that we'll identify them, right? So then what we do is we prioritize what we have, and we create a roadmap moving forward. We take all of those menial tasks that are getting in the way of the current IT folks, and we manage them proactively, and then we'll support their end users. And what that does is it helps them start to innovate for the business, right? And then we support them in that as well. So we have our roadmap, and then we work with them through whatever processes or upgrades or projects that they have to do to just to get current.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The idea of set it and forget it is something I've identified as a weakness in other managed IT companies. Do you have a cadence or quarterly kind of business review format that you do? And if you do, can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
So we do have it's a quarterly business review. Sometimes initially it's monthly, right? As we're onboarding a client, we'll have those business reviews, just making this is what we did last month. This is what's on track for next month. We may do that for 3 to 6 months, and then it'll transition over to quarterly. And in those quarterly business reviews, again, I don't want to just talk about technology and how great we are and everything that we've done for them, but I want to talk about where their business is at and, what could we do to help their business get to the next level, right? So, of course, we talk about how many tickets we opened and closed, but we don't get stuck on that. So we genuinely are a business advisor.
Sure. So one of the things we know and we've talked about is the idea that IT management has changed over the decades. When I was in IT, 25 years ago, the IT manager, knew all of the things, or at least was expected to. Right. Would know how to stand up a MX server, would know how to, their file server, would be responsible for their firewall, would negotiate the contracts for the bandwidth and the PRI or ISDNs or whatever. Nowadays, it's a little bit different. Can you talk to me about the typical professional in the IT space, maybe, what they're looking for and perhaps how they're, how it's changed?
So, yeah, for sure. So you just said it, right? That guy was the jack of all trades, yeah. Right? He knew how to do everything. And that's not the case anymore. They can't be everything to everybody. There's just too much. So they end up being a little siloed, right? So at the end of the day, it's those guys are really good at understanding what the business needs and then developing a relationship with somebody that can provide them the resources, right? Because they can't do everything that has to be done. They don't have the expertise to do it. And then where we come in is we do have the expertise to do it, but we don't silo our folks into, you're a storage guy, you're an IT security. We do have very separate skill sets, but they work together so well. So that our network administrators are working regularly with our IT security folks, right? Not that, they're being siloed to support a particular client, right? They work in conjunction with each other and with the client and what their needs are. So, to your point, the day of, the IT director just being able to do everything and, spending the weekend, upgrading the servers by himself, or they're kind of gone. There's still some of that out there. If you've ever been to a little league game with your kid, or a t-ball game, or a little football game, and the father that's there to see his kid that's sitting in the car on his phone, or he's standing behind a tree on his phone, that's the
him.
IT guy.
That's him.
That's the guy, right?
Yeah.
So we try to fix that so he can actually enjoy his family. And we are managing everything on the back end so that he doesn't have to, or she doesn't have to do that. Right?
I agree. Yeah, that is how it's changed. That's what I've identified too with our customers is that those managers are professionals. They understand, how they have to manage the investments and the infrastructure upgrades and the staff and all these details, but getting down to the detail and really the code line, prompts is just not what they do anymore. What are some of the maybe more particular gaps where you feel as an IT managed support company you can be maybe more nimble or cover things that just might be a gap in the typical kind of organizational structure of an IT department?
So an area that we've been really able to help a lot of our clients is from a virtual CIO and a virtual CISO role.
Sure.
So we help them from the executive level, right? So, and even if they have a CIO or a CTO in place, those roles are really instrumental in, even though he's a really smart person or she's a really smart person, it's always good to have somebody to have a conversation with, right? So we provide somebody in more of a lateral position to work with them. If that position doesn't exist, it's an area that we would take over for our clients. So it's a good place to start from just a relationship perspective, right? Because it's a strategy session at that point.
Okay. Now, compliance is a huge thing, no matter what business segment someone is in. Mm-hmm. With financials, particularly old investment companies, hedge funds, which you serve many. Are there any things that are specific to compliance there that you are particularly nimble at or capable of helping to either instruct them or be compliant in? Yeah,
so IT and IT security, that part, compliance is a much bigger, it's much larger than just technology, right? It touches all parts of the organization. But for the part of technology, it's us understanding what the requirements are, so that when we go through the audits or when our clients go through the audits every year, that we were able to just provide the information that the auditors are asking for, without having to go through a series of assessments to get it, right? So we've already done the work. We know what they're going to ask for. It changes from time to time, but at the end of the day, we'll be able to give them what they need. And the other thing is to make recommendations. If you go to the SEC website and you start taking a look at what the fines are and what these organizations are being fined for not being compliant, one of the biggest things that you'll see, and it shocks me every time, is the use of either personal devices or corporate devices, but they're using text messaging or WhatsApp to communicate to each other confidential client data.
Oof.
So now you have some of these large banks or large investment firms, or even the small ones, paying hundreds of millions of dollars in fines.
Oh, I bet.
So it really is, that's an education part. It's part of managing the mobile devices and providing a solution that would keep them compliant, like Teams, for instance.
Sure.
Right? You still have a chat feature in Teams, and you can easily transfer that data back and forth, and it's secure.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned this, because I think it was AT&T recently was hacked, and they took like 1 billion text message record, like every one of AT&T's text message records. So think about all the secure data that, all the data there that was thought to be secure, but it's not. It's not encrypted.
No.
Yeah, interesting. So I was on your site and I saw the assessment that you do. I think those are great. Can you tell us a little bit more about when someone just goes to Seaglass and signs up? Seemed very reasonable. I think it was like $900 to do an assessment. What is that? What's included?
So it's our entry point assessment, right? So we do an assessment, and it basically is a snapshot of the network, which gives us the ability to share with the client, so again, some of the vulnerabilities that they might be facing, even from endpoints that might not be patched properly, or antivirus software that might not be updated, or other applications that may be looking for patches. So, and we'll rate each individual device as well as the site on a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being you failed, right?
Right.
And what is almost perfect. So, and it varies, believe it or not, based on the device, right? So we take a look at that. We also take a look at the network from a very high level, network infrastructure. The assessments are generally just a snapshot, right? So we're seeing a moment in time, but it gives us a tremendous amount of information that we can start to share with the client to show them what their needs are. Because a lot of times they don't know, right? They don't know what they don't know. They think everything's great, but we 100% of the time we're finding areas for improvement. So and our goal is always to get them as close to that one as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's a nominal fee it cost us a little bit more than that to do it, but it holds a lot of value, and it gives us some credibility with the client. So that's why we do that for $9.99.
Sure, that's great. And with a lot of what we're seeing, here at Profound, but just industry-wide with our, IT partners, is that Teams is kind of the air that we breathe.
Yeah.
It's just, it's Microsoft, of course, so it's a very dominant player. I'm assuming, with many of your customers being on Teams, what are some of the things that are typical of those migrations and really those advancements as they continue to adopt it, whether it's, bringing in Teams Phone or some of the ways that they've leveraged, chat through the organization, really as you take a customer and roadmap them into that.
So the few things you just said, right? One is typically to migrate their voice over to Teams, right? So the phone on the desk is becoming a thing of the past, right? You can access your Teams number from your desktop. You're already wearing a headset for all the video calls.
Right.
You have access to your phone on the Teams app on your cell phone. And then, of course, there's the chat feature. And the other thing that it really does a good job at, especially with Copilot, is summarizing meetings, right? So if you record the meeting and everybody has action items, now you have the recording and you have a summary of what everybody said and what their takeaways are. So there's always some training, right? There's a learning curve, right? So there's some training that has to go along with it for the users, but it's been adopted. Folks are, they're accepting of Teams. A couple of years ago, when I would send out Teams meeting, I would hear, "I use Zoom. Teams
Right.
doesn't work for me." Right?
Yeah.
So that's becoming less and less of something that we're having to address.
Sure. And what are maybe some of the areas where you are, taking someone who's, Teams native, but there might be opportunity to use some other platform for their, storage or for other aspects of their cloud or production services? I, haven't looked at some of the projects you've done and we talked about it. There's this hybridized kind of approach where you're using the best tools and not just, hey, we only sell Teams because no one gets fired if we do. What are some approaches other than Teams you're seeing?
So there's a couple things, right? So the first is we're, based on the assessment that we do, it's first things first. We're not going to just walk in and sell them a bunch of stuff, right? Because that's what they need, right? So we're going to leverage the tools that they have in place. for starters, and we're going to make sure that they're using them efficiently. And if they're not the right tool, then we're going to make a recommendation for a change. So, so you talk about hybridized, right? So part of that roadmap would be maybe to have some of their infrastructure in the cloud and some of their infrastructure on-prem, and the on-prem infrastructure doesn't necessarily have to be in a data center in their office that they're paying, for the heating and cooling, but it could be in a data center, just physical servers or resources in a physical server farm. So there's a lot of ways to, to provide those services without having to buy servers. So that's really the hybrid model that we talk about.
Sure. I think that really speaks to, how Seaglass has a bench of capable, engineers, because, anybody can just, go and get their, Teams and Azure certification and, hey, you need that. Here it is. But to be able to put together, solutions for a company that incorporate a lot of different technologies, I think that's superior. That actually shows that, you are a, IT company with the credibility to solve their problems.
So, well, I mean, that is the truth. And like I said earlier, it is really about having all of the skill sets, but not only having all of the skill sets, but them being cohesive and comfortable working with each other, right? So, and part of that is the culture, right? So, we have a culture in the organization that, everybody's, it's kind of like a family, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody's really comfortable just talking to each other, and they have our entire technical staff has a Teams meeting that they're on all day, every day. Just I'm dealing with this, or have you seen this before? And I mean, you see that a lot in Slack, but we're using Teams for it. So, everybody has a really good skill set. Nobody's siloed into an area where they just don't. That's not my job. I don't touch that, right? So everybody's they're very diverse because they have the resources and they're able to work with the guy sitting next to them, or the guy sitting next to them could actually be in another state.
Sure.
So it, to me, it really is about making sure that we have the customer's best interest in mind, and what is the best solution. You have to take everything into consideration. Sometimes cost is the factor, other times cost is not an issue. Right. So so you're making decisions based on there's a lot, right? Could be the technology, could be cost, could be mobility. So
talk to me a little bit about your help desk services. How is that structured, as far as options, and then priority response, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so our help desk is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We don't have options outside of that, right? It is available through email. It is available through chat, that we would load an agent on the endpoint, and you can just chat with somebody in the help desk. They can take control of your PC, and if you're old-fashioned like me, you can pick up a phone and call, right? So our time to answer typically is under 60 seconds, right? Our SLAs for critical is that we'll respond to a critical event within 15 minutes, and our target to complete is like an hour, maybe 2 hours. Our major events are 30 minutes, and then our target is probably 3 or 4 hours. Minor events are an hour, I believe, if I'm remembering. It's in our agreement.
Sure.
And then for ads, moves, and changes, like we try to get them done the same day or the next day, right? So the SLA is probably 24 hours on that stuff.
That's pretty remarkable. I mean, first off, 24/7, that's great, yeah. And then you're being able to pick it up in about a minute.
So that's just about staffing, right? So the economy of scale. So if somebody's calling into our help desk, we don't want them sitting in queue. I mean, we did experience some delays when COVID started, and everybody was like the mass migration from the office to the house, right? So we needed to pivot a little bit, and and get that figured out so that we could support our customers better. And we did. I'm not going to say it wasn't painful, right? So, but we got through it, and we did support our clients, and Everybody was happy at the end of the day, and that's what was important to us. We spend a lot of time surveying our clients. What can we do better? After every time we close a ticket, we ask them how we did. And we genuinely want the feedback, right? It's not just, we want the feedback so that we can make the changes. You'll hear me say all the time, I don't ever want anybody suffering in silence, right? I want them to be heard the first time, right? There's, in a lot of cases, people will complain about something over and over, and they say that's just the way it is, and then they stop complaining about it because you just couldn't fix it.
Right. Yeah, that's not acceptable. So one of the things I think is remarkable about Seaglass is just how many customers you have in the hedge fund and alternative investment space. They'll remain nameless, just to honor them, but we've also worked with you on a number of those customers where we've come in and helped solve issues related to the audiovisual and presentation systems. But why is it that so many in that space choose Seaglass? What is it that that is really causing them to choose you again and again?
Yeah, so we specialize in the space, obviously. Most of our technical staff has come from within the space, right? So our network administrator was the director of IT at a large international hedge fund. Our chief information security officer was the CISO for a large international hedge fund. So we know the space. We've been working in that space. I mean, Seaglass Technology, we've been around since 2017. But we've been in technology for the last 35 years working in the alternative investment space. So it's an easy decision. And it's not only that we know the space, it really is our processes, right? So when we ask our clients, why us, right? They tell us, one is that they don't lose sleep anymore because they're concerned about, any kind of downtime, whether it's from a cyber breach or some other catastrophic event, right? Because one of the conversations that we have, a business conversation, is what is your tolerance for downtime? So
none.
Right. So we're going to design. Well, that makes it real for them, right? Because they're like, why do I have to buy that? And okay, what is your tolerance for downtime? 0. That's why you have to buy that, right? So if you say I have a tolerance to be down, 30% of the time, well, then we can discuss why that might not be necessary. So to your point, the answer always is none.
Right.
So we have those kind of conversations with them, and then we design a solution, or we modernize their current solution, or we just create a roadmap that gets us to that where we want to be with them.
That's good.
Yeah,
I like that. Thinking about the network a little bit, and not to get into too specifics, but you've got these networks that span multiple different offices. You've got remote workers. You have Internet of Things types devices that might be on subnetworks. Tell us a little bit about your capabilities in designing and implementing wired wireless networks, and just how you make sure that the customer is sleeping well at night with how you have assembled it.
So, I mean, the first thing we have in-house is our own product development team. So they're always vetting the new, whatever the latest and greatest is. And a lot of it, comes in the front door and out the back door. We'll never touch it again. But a lot of it, or a small portion of it, I should say, is actually something that we would add to our stack. So largely what that does is we become early adopters of technology. And we use them in-house before we roll them into our stack and provide them to our customers. My point with that is that our technical staff is constantly looking for continuous improvement, right? So it's not a one and done. We're not designing a network and setting it and forgetting it. We're always looking for ways to improve their infrastructure, right? So anybody can design a network, right? And that's the best way. It should be that way. But that might not be the case in 6 months or a year, right? So that's how we make sure that our customers can sleep at night. After we've done that, obviously we're monitoring everything 24/7. If there's an issue, we know about it before they do. And in a lot of cases, we're opening and closing tickets and then letting them know during our business review that this happened because they didn't even know. So those are the things we do to help them sleep at night. But it is continuous improvement. It's always trying to achieve the next level of better.
Sure. What's one piece of technology you think every small to medium-sized business should make sure to have implemented? Maybe something typical of your assessments that you say, well, we really should start here. And it could be pretty basic, but what was something you might see turn up again and again?
So I think a solid EDR solution and a solid SIEM. So, antivirus, I mean, I don't want to say it's not a thing anymore, but, detect and respond, right, is currently the solution that has to be put into place. But a lot of companies aren't using SIEM, right, which is logging. So I would say that's a piece of technology that a lot of organizations aren't using. They don't want to pay for it.
Right.
That is pretty valuable in uncovering, how it's valuable in doing the forensics for a breach
later, but
right.
Also triggering notifications based on it. Maybe just explain a little bit about what EDR is and how that monitoring helps.
So EDR is endpoint detect and respond, and it is our security operations center monitoring that for anomalies, right? So, if somebody clicks on something they're not supposed to, we might say a Word document, for instance, when you're opening an email, these 8 things trigger, right? So now all of a sudden we see a Word document opening and there's 12 things triggering. So, we may want to quarantine that and identify, what's different about this particular document before we just release it, right? So we would have a person, an actual person take a look at that, because it's an anomaly. In the areas that we're using AI is we get to know the end user's behavior. You come in at 8 o'clock in the morning, you log out at 5 o'clock at night. Now all of a sudden we're seeing a login at 2 o'clock in the morning. Doesn't mean that you can't log in. It just means it's going to raise a red flag.
Right.
So somebody's going to take a look at that. Few other things are geolocations, right? Where are your SaaS applications being logged in from? So if, we know that you are in New York and all of a sudden we see logins from Russia or China or Mexico, right? Doesn't have to be one of those other nations. Could be London, right? Could be France. But we know that you're not there, right? So we can automatically lock that down, right? Or we can alert you. So in a lot of cases, like executives will go on vacation, they'll end up in London and they're logging in, and now they can't get access to their SaaS applications. So those are some of the things for sure that clients need to have. Not clients, just organizations in general have to have in place.
Oh, sure.
To, the bad guys, the bad actors, they are becoming more and more sophisticated and they're relentless. It's their job, right? It's not, when you look at the,
it's true.
When you look at the, all of the images of the bad actor, it's always the guy in the dark with the hoodie and you can't see his face. And that's not who it is at all. It's a guy that, wakes up in the morning with his wife and 2 kids and goes downstairs and has breakfast and leaves the house with a briefcase in his hand. And, he's a happy guy.
Right.
He has paid vacation. He has, all of the things that we have as employees, paid vacation, 401k, health
Sure.
insurance. But his job is to go to work.
A career hacker.
And make money.
Yeah.
Right? So
it's true. That's funny. And I do agree with the EDR comment is kind of like what I'll refer to as like the low-hanging fruit for entities that should have that, day one. What about mobile device management? And just what are you seeing there? What are you implementing and how's it benefiting your customers?
So if mobile devices, whether they're personal or corporate owned, are accessing corporate data, they have to be managed, right? So we have to make sure that that you can't copy and paste. It's kind of a pain in the neck, right? I experience it all the time. I'll try to copy and paste something from an app that's outside of our organization into an email or Teams, and I'm not allowed to, or vice versa.
Right.
But it is necessary, right?
Compliant.
To be compliant. And if I were to ever lose my phone or laptop, that our guys can just they can't wipe out my personal data, but they can wipe out my corporate data. They can remove it from the device. So that's the huge benefit of mobile device management, and it's certainly something that every one of our clients is leveraging for sure, or they're not using their mobile devices to access corporate data, right? Which is almost non-existent, by the way.
Right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us for another installment of A Profound Sit Down, and thank you, Rob, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was a great discussion, and for those of you who joined us, feel free to learn more at seaglasstechnology.com. Thank you.